Welcome, everybody. My name is Jason Belair. I go by the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Um, I'm the co-chair for Denver Startup Week. The designer track. Charity Johnson is the other cohort. That's amazing. She's not here right now. But I do, again, want to thank you all for being here. We are very fortunate to start off a Monday morning with a topic that is all about sexiness. Nothing like that, something like that to get your blood pumping on a Monday morning. But Trent Gardner, full disclosure, is a friend of mine as well. So when you partner with Gardner Designs, you work directly with Trent. He's a stellar industrial designer focused on creating value for consumers and clients alike. He's a talented researcher that uncovers valuable insights and translates them into beautiful products and experiences that synergize with your brand. Trent helps our clients bring their ideas to life in real-world solutions that are cost-effective and revered by customers. He is also the chair for IDSA, which is the Industrial Designer Society of America for all of Denver. So we're very thankful that he's taken up that role in that position. He helps the design community and specifically this industry come together. He's the father of 5 beautiful daughters. And without further ado, I'm going to just pass it on to you, sir.
Thank you, Jason. So yes, I am the chair of IDSA Denver. So if you have any questions about what we're doing, what upcoming events and that kind of thing, let me know. If you are a designer, we have a portfolio review coming up in October. So feel free to talk to me afterwards. I'm excited to be here. I don't know about you guys, but Startup Week, right? That's right. There you go. There you go. Let's wake up. It's Monday. Exactly. So first things first, on the description, we were going to have a panel. My colleagues could not make it, so I thank you for being understanding with them for that. Things come up, right? As Jason said, my name is Trent Garner. I am a design consultant. I love design, and I'm gonna go through my presentation for you guys today. So it won't be as long as what we had planned for like a full hour, but maybe that'll open up time for more questions for you guys. Okay, you don't want to listen to me drone on for an hour, do you? No. I don't even want to listen to myself for an hour, right? Okay. Just so that you all know, this is the subject, why research is sexy. So a little bit about our agenda today. I'm going to tell you who I am and why you should listen to me. Why research. We'll talk through a few of examples and case studies, and then we'll do questions, okay? And if you can't read the text, I'm sorry. I thought it was going to be on a bigger screen. But you'll just have to listen to me. Okay, love snowboarding. I love the outdoors. I love my family, and I love design. So as far as snowboarding is like my passion, outdoors, I'm not a camper, so don't hold that against me. I love to go on hikes, okay? So Colorado's a great place for me. As Jason mentioned, I have 5 daughters. The picture here on the bottom, that's my oldest. She got married recently. And then, the bookends are the other daughters. They're all very different, too. Very different personalities. It's hilarious. You're like, oh. Okay, so why design? When I was growing up, I absolutely loved art. Loved it. And throughout high school and even through college, I was like, oh, I'm going to do pre-med. I'm going to make a lot of money going to medical school. And then I took a few classes like chemistry. Anybody do good in chemistry at all? Some of you. You guys are awesome. Brainiacs, right? So I did terrible in those classes, and I'm like, this is not for me. So I went back to design, and I studied. I was going to do graphic design, but decided So I transferred to Brigham Young University, where they have a stellar graphic design program, world-renowned. And then I came across industrial design and just fell in love with it. I'm like, that's it. That's what I'm doing. So the three-dimensional aspects of design, the interaction points, and everything else about design was really what got me excited about it. So from there, a little history, went to Lunar Design for my internship. Extremely talented people. Worked on things like this ultrasound machine, all the way down to little toothbrushes, okay? Really fun place. After I graduated, I worked at Cleveland Golf and designed golf clubs. So from there, I was like, well, why? It's a really fun industry to work in, but it was also not what I felt like design could do completely. Right? It's a lot about styling. What's the aesthetics of this? What is the tastiest looking thing you can drop in front of a consumer, right? So that was what we would do. So then I went back to school, went to University of Illinois. Anybody from the Midwest? Okay. Great school. And I learned how, you're probably wondering, where the hell is he going with all this, right? So this is where I started to learn about user-centered design and designing for the customers and why, right? So really great school for that. From there, I graduated and I worked for a variety of companies. And I helped a lot of these companies develop products that were user-centered and generated the company lots of money. So why? Why is design research sexy, you guys? Smiles. You get smiles all the way across the board. If you do this right, and even if you do it slightly right, you will get customers that love you for the products that you are creating. So how do you do this? You need to connect with the customers. That product, like the teddy bear, they need to love it, right? So you need to create that kind of relationship with your customers. So I'm going to go through a case study so that you can kind of see my thought process. I don't think it's like a proprietary thing. It's something that's timeless, but you can use it for almost any design problem that you come across. Okay, so this is a ride-on piece of equipment. I don't know if you've ever been to DIA late at night, but there are some big pieces of equipment that they're cruising around on to clean with, right? That's what they're using to clean the floors. So here's the situation. There were lots of quality issues with this product. And the profit margins were low. It was getting old. And customers were not coming back. They would buy one and not come back for another machine. So when I arrived at Karcher, this was for Karcher, they were very keen on getting the product done, right? Oh, we got this timeline. We got this. Come on, let's go, right? And I said, well, why is it that people aren't coming back to buy these? Right, so we have to ask questions, take a step back, because sometimes it's easy to just draft in behind people and be like, okay, yep, that's great, let's just go. So I asked that question, and I went out and I talked to the customers that drive these pieces of equipment. It turns out, so you can see the picture in the center. Those of you in the back, I'll describe it for you. There is a shoe that is used to pick up water. You put down water and you pick it up with this type of machine. Well, the team had developed a really robust design, but it required 72 steps to take it apart and clean it. 72. Right? So it was actually over here at the convention center that I went. They have a ton of carpet, right? They use these machines. So they were getting streaks. And I'm like, why are you guys getting streaks? Up and down. And they were pissed, right? So anyway, I took this thing off, and it was completely clogged, right? So it's not going to clean things. And I'm like, why aren't you guys cleaning this? Like, well, we didn't even know that it was dirty or how to clean it. So on the right, there's a sketch of just how can we create this so that it doesn't require, that's all right, it doesn't require 72 steps. So instead, 2 latches, boom, boom. You latch the bottom of the thing on, very few steps, right? Not 72. And that is what we can provide as designers and engineers. And so the other thing that we noticed is that the pumps would clog. Some of the detergents and things that would go through the pumps, they would clog up. So I said, well, why do we need a pump? Why don't we just have it be gravity fed? Like, oh, okay, yeah, let's do it. And it took some time to develop that and figure out how to get that to work. But those innovations, here's kind of sketches. I got excited. I'm still a designer at heart, right? Still got to make things look cool. So here's the results. We doubled predicted sales volume when we launched it. Increased repeat sales rates by 10%, right? Instead of 0, up to 10%. And people kept coming back because people wanted it. We made that so we changed the design. I'm sorry, I should probably have a picture of the design that we came up with in the end. But by changing that, it made it really easy to clean. All they have to do is take it apart, take it off the machine, take it over the sink, put it back together, put it back on the machine, right? So they love it. They love it. So again, smiles, right? It reduced the amount of time it takes to clean. It reduced the amount of effort. So picture yourself, you're a janitor, and you're working at night, overnight. You're not going to want to clean that thing at the end of your shift unless it's super easy. So we got to keep those customers in mind. Again, it brings smiles. Okay. Anybody know who this is? They can see that. Who is that? It's Jane Goodall. So how do we do this? We want to... Jane Goodall did a great job as an ethnographer, right? She would go out and observe the chimpanzees in their natural environment and lived with them to really understand the culture. But obviously, we're not going to do that, right? You're not going to go live with people. But spend a day or two with your customers and understand what they're really experiencing. Ask them to perform different tasks and see what they're doing. Okay. After they do those tasks, you want to ask them questions because you'll notice workarounds that they have created or ways that they have basically made it so that it takes them longer, but it works around some particular problem. So ask them questions because they may not even realize that, oh, I didn't even realize I'm doing that now because they've been doing it for so long, right? Okay. From there, and a lot of this I'm kind of blowing through this pretty quickly, but a lot of this takes time. So then you want to synthesize that information that you gather from your customers, and you want to do that in a way that it's worded as a need. Are you guys familiar with that process? Yeah? Okay. You don't want to word it as a solution because then then you don't open it up for a nice brainstorm. And then you go back out with those particular needs to the customers and you say, hey, which one of these needs is the most important? Which one is, and how well is that need being met? Okay, those are two important questions because those two might counter each other. Which one is the most important and which one is not being met today? So you can do that. You can go out to them with just surveys. Right? You don't have to go out to them again. You can just do it through like SurveyMonkey or whatever kind of survey software you have. Okay. So now that we've gone through this, you guys want to do I'm going to have you guys do some observation. You guys on board with that? It'll just be pictures, a picture or two. And you're going to tell me what you see. And some of you, if you want to, you can come up. If not, that's fine too. But so this is another Karcher product that is it's an extractor. Do you guys know what an extractor is? It's for shampooing carpet, basically. Okay? So you're going to extract the dirt and grime out of carpet. It's not like pulling teeth, but you're pulling dirt out of the, right? Somebody laughed. Thank you for laughing. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the situation. Then we will do, the play along here. So the product line was 15 years old. We were losing market share. That was the biggest thing, right? Losing market share to the competitors. And some of the goals were to just maintain market share, maintain market leadership, increase market share, and increase profit margins. Okay? Okay. So this is Ned. Ned, it was so funny. So the back of his shirt, he was wearing like a volleyball shirt, and his shirt said Nedlicious. I loved it. I was like, oh, Ned, you're awesome. So I want you to look at this picture and tell me you're observing Ned using this extractor. And kind of tell me what are some of the problems that you see with this picture? Back pain. The power cord. He's not smiling. It's not easy to maneuver. There's two wheels. It's not that easy to see where he's going. Great. You guys, see? You guys are great. You can tell a lot about products and how they're used in a pretty quickly when you're observing people in their environment, right? And we're not Jane Goodall, but we're doing some rapid ethnography to understand, okay, so Ned is going to trip over this cord sooner or later. His back's going to hurt. How about this one? He's tipped. Now, this is a different machine, slightly different because different color, but he's tipped the machine back. So imagine you've cleaned carpets with this thing. Yeah. It's probably still plugged in. That's a good possibility. What's there to worry about? Right? Okay. So very good. Very good. You guys, so you can see that just by observing, just taking a step back from things, you can find a lot of nuggets, right? A lot of nuggets just from observing people doing their normal tasks. All right, so here were some of the things that we came out of it with. Walking backwards. So that's the other thing that you can't really tell from the picture, but traditionally when you extract, you walk forward, then you pull it back, right? Walk forward, then you pull it back, okay? Yeah, and moving the cord and see how he's got it draped over his shoulder. That's traditionally how most people do it because it keeps it out of the way. The weight of the device is heavy. Machine is difficult to maneuver. Cord management is challenging. So you guys picked up on even more than I did, right? These are some of the biggest pain points that we felt would be the most valuable for the customers. But the other thing is to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. You want to have positives too, right? You can't just be like, oh, this thing is terrible. You can't go back to your clients or to the team that you work with and say, this is absolutely terrible. Maybe it is, but bring something back, right? Do the sandwich method. You guys familiar with the Oreo or the sandwich method? Have something positive, then fill it with some things that they didn't work on, and always bring something back. So it's a great machine, cleans well, reliable, and the size is good. Okay, so from there, you want to take those needs and start sketching out ideas. How do I increase maneuverability? How do I make it less labor intensive? So I thought, well, what if it's a cart that has like a separate vacuum? Or what if you could just steer this thing and walk forward? So these pictures are dark because they're actually from video, but we built several prototypes to try out these ideas. So it's about building your ideas very quickly and testing them out with your customers. And then from there, they'll tell you, this is good, this is bad. You don't want to be going into production and then go out to your customers saying, hey, what do you think? You spent everything at that point. So right here on the right, that's a big block of styrofoam. There's plywood. There's, they're not expensive prototypes. So we ended up liking the steering methodology. And as a designer, you need to design, what's this going to look like? How's it going to relate to the rest of the brand? And we ended up with the design on the right. So one of the other observations that I had when I was out there, you see the spray bottle in the back of this? People would actually have a grocery bag that they would tie to their extractor when they went out to use it. I'm like, what is that? Oh, it's our spotter. So they use a spray spotter. I'm like, well, okay. Let's just give them a spot for the spotter, will ya? So, anyway, and then you can see these sort of ribs that go down along the back of that. There are some facilities that are not ADA compliant, so they may have like one or two steps. That curve comes tangent with the back of the wheel, so it'll just slide right up a step real easy. Okay, so those are the kind of things that we want to do. We want to really please customers. Oh, the cord management, I forgot about that. See that little pigtail up here? Can you see that? That's for the cord. You would be surprised how much that helps. It's about 9 inches, but that lifts it up off the machine, makes it much more maneuverable. So that's what we look for as designers. And as the business people in the room are like, oh, that's nice. What's the bottom line, Trent? You want to know? I'll tell you. Okay, decrease cleaning time by 33%. So imagine you're a contract cleaner, and you go to them and you say, okay, I can decrease your labor by 33% when cleaning carpets. Boom, right? So there's the bottom line for you. decreased drying time, cord management. I'll tell you, we took this thing out, and the first guy we took it to, he was smiling when he was using it. He's like driving it around and like, yeah. So I'm like, we got something. We got it. Okay. We don't need to get into all that. The one on the bottom, increased sales volume prediction by 55% in the first year, right? 55. So that's what design can do for you. That's what research can do for you. It's beautiful. And I love it because I don't feel like, it's not about the dollars, it's about the end customer for me. Right? To see that guy smiling when he's using that, I'm like, yeah, that's it. Okay. What if it's not a product? How are we doing on time? We're good. So, what if it's not a product, Trent? You can use this process for anything, in my eyes. And it's just a matter of, you may need to adjust it a little bit. But for this particular one, projects were taking too long. So for this client, they're like, hey, we're coming up with great products, but things are taking too long. It's costing us too much money to develop. So we need you to help us develop a new process. Like, okay. So we met with all the teams, right? All the players involved with these product development teams, and said, okay, tell me from your perspective, what's working, what's not working. And so we gathered all that information, and then we brainstormed, and we created a much more efficient way of doing product development. Okay, I don't know if you guys are any of you familiar with. So we did a hybrid of kind of lean and agile together because it was. And if you are familiar with what is it called, the lean startup, we used part of his methodology because we're like, it's very much used in software, right? To develop user interfaces and that kind of thing. So we applied that to their process, and we tweaked it so that it worked for this particular client, and it decreased timelines by 15% and increased innovation by 20%. So really, the idea was to take things back out to the customer quickly. They would get way too far along in the process and spent too much time and money before they took things out to their customers. Again, what if it's not a product? So, what if it's a brand? Right? Tell me about a brand. So this is Z-Tractor. Anybody familiar with Z-Tractor? Okay, they are a startup out in the Bay Area, and they came to me and said, help us to define what our brand should be and how that should look. I said, okay, well, what have you done so far? And there was a just brilliant designer that worked for him, and he had done just so many sketches and so many things. And I'm like, okay, well, do you have any kind of document that defines for you what your target is? He's like, no, it's just me reviewing it with the CEO. I'm like, okay, well, let's set some boundaries around this so that you have an idea of, and we can go back to him and also say what's going on here. Okay, so this is what the machine looked like for. It's an autonomous electric tractor. Okay, really cool thing. So I went out and I said, I'm not very familiar with tractors, but I went out and I had so much fun doing the research and figuring out what are the brands that are out there. And then I came back to them and said, okay, on this matrix, where do you guys think the brand should be? And I had it picked out for myself where they thought and we came to an agreement.
So, the matrix is, or the axes are angular versus soft, and technical versus simple. So, how do you look in comparison to your competitors? Okay. From there, we developed descriptors of the brand language, like confident, strong, distinctive, and had just a ton of images and boards, and this really helped the designer and the CEO just come to an agreement on, okay, this is the direction we should go. Right? So again, problem solving with design thinking. They also needed help with UI and UX. Just, hey, here's where we are. So I helped them out with that. But here's the final concept. So I basically helped them to organize their thoughts, right? Using design thinking. I'm asking them questions, right? Trying to do the research and understand, okay, what have you done? Where are you now? Where do you want to go? And really just facilitated the conversation between the CEO and the other designer. Now, so this is where we ended up with the design, and this allowed that designer to, he learned a lot, but now he's set, right? He's set, and he can continue to grow and develop. So in the end, so the key takeaways here are stay curious and ask questions, right? Like with Z-Tractor, I'm asking questions. Any client, whether it's a Fortune 500 company or just a startup, ask questions to really understand. Observe the customers in their environment. Interview them. Listen, be open-minded. And I think the last one's important. Be a passionate advocate. That's big, because you may be the last line of defense. Because remember that first product that I showed? They're like, let's go, let's go, let's go. I'm like, well, wait. Do you guys know why you're not getting repeat sales? Like, no? Okay. So ask those questions that are going to prompt people to grow and learn. Okay. So thank you so much. My name's Trent Garner. I'm the IDSA Denver chair. I have a QR code to my website if you really want it, or you can just send me an email. I don't know if you're going to be able to get the QR code to work from back there with the small screen, but come and talk to me afterwards if you want to talk further. We're going to open it up for questions. And my good friend, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Thank you, Jason.
Hello.
Is going to wander around. So any questions at all? And I'm willing to sit here as long as you. Okay, we have a question.
I've already got them.
Right here.
So my question, we're pre-fundraising, validating scope for our MVP, basically, of our product that we're launching.
Okay.
And we're in like a user testing, user research validation period for like a month, so a very compressed timeline.
Okay.
And my question is really around, you mentioned, or at least what I've noticed is that UX is very much on understanding the way they work, observations, the problems that they have, and then there's more of the product management, product discovery of like testing and validating. So I was just curious, when you were doing kind of more of the open-ended user research, are you going in with like, how do we improve, like kind of those business results you mentioned? Is that what you're kind of walking in with, is like, we want to reduce cleaning time by a certain percentage, and then you're figuring out how to get there? Or are you doing more open-ended of watching Ned work, figure out what benefits you could find in his workflow? Like, how do you kind of manage that outcome versus what you can observe?
Okay. So he wants to know if did everybody hear that? Okay. Great question. So I tend to approach it from both directions, because you can't always get out to do the research, right? So you may find some nuggets that are great for a later project, or you may have that nugget and be able to use it in the project that you're working on now, right? Usually, you can approach it in any way you want. You can be very broad or very specific, right? In the case of the extractor, I'm watching people run extractors, right? But I'm also watching what the whole process is. Okay, how do you set this up? Where do you store? So you really want to build the whole use case scenario. What are the steps? Okay, where do you store this? Where do you fill it up? Where do you get your chemicals? Where do you get? So I want to have the whole journey in mind, not just the extraction part of it. Okay. And usually you will find other things. I've also gone out on my own for this particular client. I said, I don't think we know why people clean. Do we understand that? I said, I don't know. I'm like, okay, so that gave me a whole research project to start. So it could be very broad like that. What motivates people to clean, right? So I tend to look for the opportunities throughout the spectrum, because the broader one could lead to something that's totally innovative, right? This is in close-in innovation with the extractor, right? It's not breakthrough. It's close in.
Hi.
Hi.
My question was, I was really curious to ask you, when you were testing out the prototype of the carpet cleaning machine and you
Yeah.
actually built out prototypes and had people kind of drive them around,
Yeah.
did you use some sort of weights, or like how accurate was that experience, the physical experience?
That's a great question. So they did not have like the capability to like vacuum, right? But they did have a motor to drive it. And a motor is quite heavy. So it wasn't like dead nuts to what the weight should be, but it was more about, hey, do the interactions with this and you tell me. But it wasn't like, I can see where you're going with the styrofoam. Was it like super light and they're like, oh, this is awesome, right? No, there was some mass to it. Because it would function and, with the motor, and there were actually brushes on it, so it would drive. It's a good point. You want to try and get something that simulates, what the weight would be, or what the true state of that thing would be when you're testing it. It's a good point. She's smart. Okay.
Kind of building on the first question there, you were kind of referring to moments of both divergent thinking and convergent thinking in that process.
Yeah.
And I'd like to kind of dig into that a little bit more on those case study examples, as far as like at what point were you kind of going more divergent versus at what point did you start to get more convergent?
Yeah. That's a great. The big struggle is everybody has a timeline, right? So you have to converge sooner or later. Usually, when I go out and I get this list of needs after I've gone through and synthesized everything, then I'm going to diverge even more, right? We're going to brainstorm ideas with engineers, with marketing, with all the key stakeholders, and we'll come up with a ton of different ideas. And then from there, you'll funnel those down. You'll say, okay, and you can go back out to the customer at that point. You may build. That's what we did. Like, okay, here's the two concepts that we think are good. Help us to understand which one you like better and why. Right? So that's an example of what we would do. You would have, so some of those little details that we worked through at the end that I talked through, like the spot for the spotter, the pigtail. I mean, those were things that were brainstormed. Like, how do we manage this cord? I don't know. So we tried a bunch of things, built a bunch of things, and tried them. But that's the process for me. It's building prototypes, taking them out to people, trying them out, and remember that you're not the expert in all this. It's the people that are interacting with it. 'Cause you may think, oh, this is so great, and then you go out and you're like, oh, this stinks, right? But it's good to know that at that point, right? So. Okay.
Given what you just said about the person creating is not the expert, the customer is, but testing is very important. So how do you know when to stop testing? Like, how many customers had to use your different prototypes for you guys to say, you know what, I think we have enough data? And also, how do you know how many different situations to test? So, like, there's low carpet, there's high carpet. There, you know, like, what do you use? What's your rule of thumb?
Okay. Good question. I like that. Anybody want to answer it? So it's a tough question because, again, it goes back to, well, how much time do I have? You know, usually you start to get to a saturation point, right? So after you've shown X amount of people that doohickey that you've come up with, then you start to see saturation, where you see redundancy in the data, right? Remember that this is qualitative, right? It's not quantitative. If you really don't want to do quantitative, usually that I've heard the number of like 30 is kind of where you start to get saturation. So I usually like to have, maybe 10 people interact with it, but you'll start to really see some of the issues and some of the positives in doing that. But it also depends on how complex the thing is, right? If it's something like that autonomous tractor, I think that's going to require a lot of testing, right? Because it's going to have to run by itself. But then, and it could do some serious damage, right? So it depends on the amount of safety that's involved with it, like whether someone's going to be in danger with that, how much testing goes into it. Does that answer your question? Minimum? I don't know. Again, it depends on the complexity. If it's something that's pretty simple, it's like, okay, maybe 5 to 10 people. Then you start seeing, okay, yeah, I think we're wrong on this part and right on this part, and you go from there. Okay.
I'd like to ask a question or
Oh no.
two. Oh yeah. So
He asks tough questions. So
yeah, I do.
he does.
So one of the things that I find interesting is that we're living in a world that we're trying to build more DEI kind of compositions within the testing, and sometimes it can be maybe that feedback's not good, and sometimes the results can be kind of, I guess, for the lack of a better term, skewed. There's a really good book out called Invisible Women. It's by Caroline Criado Perez. And it's basically about data bias in a world designed for men. And so I'm curious to know, like, it's called Invisible Women, Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. This is one of the really good books, a lot of good ones out there. But so just curious to know, like, how do you because some of what we're talking about is also in terms of quantity. What are you doing? How many do you do? A lot of that is somewhat predetermined by a capitalistic culture, right? The stakeholders already have sort of an idea of what they want. They want to hire someone to either come in and be disruptive or come in and be validating what they already think they know. It's really complex, is what I think I hear you saying as well. So how do you be that catalyst and that sort of advocate for broadening the picture, being more inclusive with the research approach, maybe even getting the UN 17 SGD, concepts into that process so that you're really building something out that's not been done before?
Okay. So let me see if I understand your question. It's about, you're asking about how like if for example, if a client comes to me and says, this is what we want you to research, this is the exact customer, this is the product, and I come into it and I'm like, you're really not going to get much out of that? Is that what you're...
Essentially, your job and my job is
Yes.
to come into a context and to educate.
Yeah.
So what are we doing in terms of not being repetitious and sort of doing the same thing over and over again, but bringing in, like even talking about the metaverse and how
Yeah.
that applies to some of the work that you're doing now.
Thanks for coming, man.
There's a tip jar on the way out. Just
Yeah. I actually have a project that just started recently, and like, yeah, we want you to come in and do a brainstorm. So come facilitate a brainstorm. I'm like, okay, what do you want that brainstorm to be about, or what do you So they came out with a lot of preconceived things, and I'm working with them now to say, okay, wait, that's probably not going to give you what you want. So we either need to go out and rescope this so that you get more innovative ideas, and we're going to have to reschedule it for later in the year, just because there's not enough time to structure this brainstorm to really make it effective. So I'm having to educate the designer and the product manager on that team, saying, look, we're going to have to rescope this and that's okay. Right, we could just be like, all right, whatever. We can go in and charge them for the brainstorm, but in the end, are they going to be happy with it? Are you going to be happy with it? That's my approach to that.
And for those who are interested, there's another really good book.
He's always got great books.
It's
What was
called
the other one? It was Invisible Women.
Women.
Okay.
And the other one is Everybody Lies. It's big data, new data, and what the internet can tell us about who we really are. And it's by Seth Steven Davidowitz. He was quite the catalyst for doing work on the Google Analytics. But a lot of what we're talking about here too is it seems like it's not just about a designer looking at things through those optics. It's about having a sensibility to psychology and behavioral sciences. So what do you do to gain greater knowledge so that you have more power when you go into those conversations?
Yeah, that's another good question. So for me, you and I both love like HBR, right? And listening to
Harvard
those.
Business Review.
Yeah.
We're addicted.
Yeah. So there's a great podcast that they do. I'm forgetting what it's called off the top of my head, but that's a great way to stay in tune with that. For me, it goes back to the kind of that not the last bullet, but one of the bullets. Just stay curious and keep reading, keep growing. Someone's gonna someone is going to teach you something today, right? And you're gonna learn it, and don't think that you know everything. Keep asking questions. Keep
Any-
reading.
Yes. Any more questions? Yes.
So his question kind of made me think about my fiance works with people who have disabilities and getting jobs for them. He does job development. And a lot of times they have trouble with just signing in through like a phone app. Like they
Yeah.
can do the physical work, but they have trouble like even clocking in. So I'm curious, like even thinking with you and some of the janitorial roles, like he was saying, like researching maybe outside of what the standard already is, you know, like those roles might eventually transition over time to people with like disabilities. And, you know, how do you kind of like factor that kind of research into your product, or do you think about those other populations, maybe like how you're introducing them to your stockholders and stuff?
Yeah, yeah. It's a challenge, right? Because there's a lot of times there's the users that you're interacting with may not be in that situation, right? How do you accommodate? How you do accommodate users with different levels of abilities, and I think that's one of the great things about design is that you can continue to improve products, right? That's the beauty of it, and the beauty of like software is that you're always improving, always trying to make things easier. You know, I started out designing golf clubs, but felt like there was so much more to design. And one of the main reasons for me to think about that was I noticed that my grandpa was he had trouble walking, and he was supposed to use a walker, but he didn't want to use the walker. Do you guys know why? It's not cool. He didn't want. He said, "I don't want to." The handicap word, right? I don't want to be perceived as handicapped, and for that reason, I spend a lot of my time working with medical companies that are developing products that are helping people in one way or another. And, it's because of that thought process. I'm okay. I'm not. That's what I'm passionate about, right? So, it's not easy, right? I mean, he would even use. He had trouble grabbing things, so he had these things that he would put on his forks to be able to feed himself, right? Because he couldn't close his hands that way. This is very arthritic. So I know what you're saying. I think it's the idea is to just really try and design for make things really easy to use for everybody, right? Is the answer. That was too long of an answer. Sorry. You kind of touched on something that it's personal to me. So.
Hi. Kind of continuing on that, how often do you think your design process takes into account the mental and the societal design issues over the physical product requirements?
It really is. It's a combination of all those things because you normally you have to kind of think a little bit about things when you're doing them, right? Until they become automatic, right? So a lot of it is there's people being cognizant of what they're doing and thinking about what they're doing. But there's a lot of times where they're not aware of it. You know, I've gone to We went to a hotel one time to observe them cleaning the hotel, and the vacuum wasn't working very well, and it was just full, completely full. Right? And I'm like, okay. We opened it up, and it didn't even have a bag in it, right? It's to collect anything. But so the reality is that people are going to mess things up all the time, and they're going to use products in the way that you don't want them to. You can come up with a standard operating procedure, and they will do completely the opposite. And you'll watch them do this, and you're like, oh my gosh, that makes no sense, but okay. So it's a combination of all those things together. I don't know if I answered your question or not. I didn't. You don't think I did? What kind of weight? Oh, okay. I don't know. For me, it is a bit of an art form, right? You're watching people interact with them, and until you watch them do it, to me, I like to have physical objects or even a user interface and watch them do it, and then ask them, okay, did you notice, like, there was one study that we did recently where there were buttons that had like information for them to click on, and then they didn't click on them, and they weren't sure what to do next. And so, did you notice that there were buttons? No. Okay, we'll click on them. Oh, okay, right. So it's kind of a mishmash of both, to be honest with you, and it depends on what the situation is. Last question. Okay.
Some of the other questions I think are all kind of circling around what I'd like to ask. It sounds like you've been in enough situations at enough companies where you're dealing with a lot of competing lists of success criteria from different stakeholders, from users to your internal teams, your financial people that are looking for, delivery to the market at a certain time and,
Yeah.
revenue and things like that. As a designer who's trying to focus on doing, as designers, we know that what's going to make a product successful is when people really love it. But can you give some examples in your career of how you've kind of managed those competing priorities of different stakeholders to convince that sales team or operations team that they're going to have to wait because we've got to take the time to redesign this and do it right?
Yeah. Yeah. You're always going to be up against that. Always. Some companies are better at it than others. You're always going to have to be an advocate, right? And evangelizing the power of design, because some companies are really good and they'll just let you do your thing, right? Some are like, oh, when are you going to deliver this? Like, well, I'll tell you. So how do you balance that? You have to know when to push and when not to push. And you also need to know what's going to fit for you personally. Right? Some companies are just, they're not going to put up with it. Right? Here's the timeline. That's it. Right? And that may not work for you. Yeah, I think you really got to know when to push it. That's my advice, because you're going to wear yourself out too. If you find something like that steering thing, people didn't want to do that. They didn't want to do it. They're like, why can't we just reskin another extractor? And I'm like, because there's no value in it. You want to gain market share? This is how you're going to gain market share. So, and I pushed. Yeah, you have to speak their language, right? You have to, and you have to talk dollars and cents to the businessmen too. You have to sell it to them because they're, and you got to sell it to the engineers too. It's like, well, yeah, and you got to speak their language. So yeah, design is so much about. We never learned this in school. I don't know about you, Jason, but it's so much about communication that you better be good at communicating. So, did I answer your question? Okay. All right. So thank you so much for coming. It was fun, and if you guys are interested in any of the IDSA events, let me know, and just shoot me an email. We're interested in learning more about what we do at Garner Design. That I'd be happy to help you out.